The sound of the shot echoed through the neighborhood. I froze. A single shot, and everything I knew about this quiet suburban life crumbled in an instant. The air went still, thick with disbelief. The blood that stained the front yard, the look on my daughter's face, I could barely process what had just happened. It wasn't supposed to be like this. This wasn't supposed to happen in our neighborhood. My daughter, Rachel, was standing at the door, her hands shaking as she held onto the frame, eyes wide with terror. And standing in front of her on the ground was her husband, Ryan. Blood pooling beneath him, the life fading from his eyes. I didn't even hear the second shot. I only heard the first one, the one that made everything change. And standing there, holding the gun, was Karen, the HOA president. The same woman who had caused us endless trouble with her incessant complaints about our lawn, the fence, the noise, petty grievances that made her a nuisance, but never once a threat. Or so I thought. But this was something else entirely. She had crossed a line that could never be undone. She'd shot someone in cold blood, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea that I wasn't just a grieving father-in-law. I wasn't just someone she could push around with her rules and regulations. I was an FBI agent. The moment I saw Rachel's face, the horror, the shock, the disbelief, I made one vow. Karen was going to pay for this. But the question was, how far would I go to make sure she did? I had spent my career in law enforcement, first as a local detective, then moving into the FBI, chasing criminals, solving cases that seemed impossible. I had seen death, despair, and destruction in its many forms. But nothing had prepared me for this. The last time I had seen Rachel and Ryan, they were laughing, planning a weekend getaway, looking forward to the future. Ryan was everything I could have hoped for as a son-in-law. He loved Rachel fiercely and took care of her with a devotion that I admired. They were happy. They were building a life together. That happiness was shattered in a second by a woman who thought she had the right to control everything around her. It started with the HOA. Of course, it always did with Karen. She was relentless, making petty complaints to anyone who would listen, finding fault with the smallest things. She had been after us for months, accusing Rachel and Ryan of violations, the kind of violations that existed only in her twisted version of order. We had been through it all, late-night meetings where Karen would stand up, wagging her finger at us, demanding we fix things that weren't even broken. The backyard fence was a foot too high. The garden was too untidy, and Ryan had parked his truck too close to the curb. Endless complaints, endless frustration. But none of it ever felt dangerous. It was just Karen being her usual, controlling self. That is until today. Ryan had come over to help Rachel clean out the garage. They were going to spend the day together, organizing the mess and making it more livable. I was at work, and my wife was out grocery shopping. It was supposed to be a normal day. I was sitting in my office, reviewing case files when I got the call. "Dad," Rachel's voice cracked on the phone. "Dad, it's Ryan. He's been shot. Karen shot him. She shot him in front of me." My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone, my mind spinning with confusion, disbelief, anger. What the hell was she thinking? How could this happen in my own neighborhood, in front of my daughter? I couldn't get there fast enough. The adrenaline kicked in as I rushed out the door. But as I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel must be going through. She had witnessed the shooting, seen the man she loved fall before her, powerless to save him. The thought of her alone in that moment was unbearable. When I finally arrived at the house, the scene was worse than I could have imagined. Ryan was on the ground, blood soaking through his shirt. Rachel was kneeling beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to keep him conscious. And there, standing in the doorway, was Karen, the gun still in her hand. I stopped in my tracks, the fury inside me rising to a boiling point. Karen looked at me as if she hadn't just shot my daughter's husband in cold blood, as if this was some petty confrontation over HOA rules. "Oh, David," she said, her voice sickly sweet, as if she were discussing a neighbor's minor inconvenience. "Your daughter's husband is causing too much trouble. He wouldn't listen. You know how it is." I had no choice. No choice. The words echoed in my mind, but the only thing I could hear now was the ringing in my ears. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was something far darker. She wasn't just some woman who liked to throw her weight around. She was a threat. A real one. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea who I was. I wasn't just a father. I wasn't just a man trying to protect his family. I was an FBI agent, and this was no longer about rules or complaints. This was about justice. This was about making sure that Karen never hurt anyone again. But I had to keep calm. I had to think. I couldn't let her see me as just another victim. I needed to take control. I pulled my phone from my pocket, calling for backup, already thinking about the steps ahead. But I wasn't waiting for anyone to arrest Karen. I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done. Karen stood there in front of me, her stance almost casual, the gun still loosely gripped in her hand, as if this was just another one of her ridiculous HOA meetings. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at me, her lips curling into a mocking smile that I knew far too well. "You know, David, this didn't have to happen," she said with a sickening calmness. "I've been trying to maintain order around here for months, and your family just doesn't get it." I could feel my blood boiling. She had just shot my son-in-law in cold blood, and she was standing here talking about maintaining order? This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about control, manipulation, and a complete disregard for human life. And I had enough. I took a step toward her, forcing myself to stay calm even though the anger was nearly overwhelming. "You just shot him," I said, my voice low but steady. "You shot Ryan, and you have the nerve to stand here talking about rules. No, Karen, you don't get to play the victim. You crossed a line, one that you can't walk back from." Her eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and annoyance. She wasn't used to being confronted this way. She was used to bullying people, to getting away with whatever she wanted because people were too afraid to stand up to her. "David," she said, her voice a little more shrill now, "I did what I had to do." He was threatening the neighborhood. His loud music, his truck in the driveway, everything was against the rules. I gave him a chance to fix things, but he wouldn't listen. So I had to act. "You had to act," I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You had to shoot him to enforce your rules? What kind of monster are you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unforgiving. But Karen didn't seem fazed. She glanced down at the gun in her hand, almost as if she were admiring it, then back up at me with a smirk. "Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, David. You wouldn't understand," she said, shrugging as if the entire situation were just another inconvenience for her to deal with. I could see the arrogance in her posture, the utter disregard she had for the life she'd just taken. This wasn't a woman who was sorry. This wasn't a woman who was afraid of the consequences. She didn't even seem to care that she had just shattered a family. I stepped closer, now within arm's reach, my voice growing darker, more deliberate. "You don't understand, Karen. You're not some petty HOA president with a vendetta against my family anymore. You're a criminal. You've committed murder. And you're not walking away from this. Not this time." Her expression faltered for just a moment, and I could see a flash of something, maybe fear, maybe realization, cross her face. For the first time, the smugness seemed to crack. "Do you really think the police will believe you?" she asked, trying to regain her composure. "You think anyone will take your word over mine? I'm the one in control here. I have the power. I've always had the power." The laugh that bubbled up from my chest wasn't one of amusement. It was cold, harsh, born from a sense of complete disbelief at her arrogance. "Karen, do you really think that after everything you've done, I care about your so-called power?" I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You're not untouchable. You're just a coward who thought you could control everyone around you with fear and manipulation. Well, guess what? This ends today." I could feel the weight of my training, my experience in the FBI, kicking in now. I wasn't just a father angry at what had happened to his family. I was an agent of the law, and I was going to make sure Karen was held accountable. But I couldn't let her see my next move just yet. I had to bide my time. I wasn't going to let her make the first move again. I reached for my phone, still in my pocket, but Karen noticed. "No, don't," she started, her eyes wide with sudden panic, but was too late. I had already called in backup. The authorities would be here soon, but wouldn't be fast enough. She seemed to weigh her options, her finger tightening on the gun's trigger. I could see it in her eyes. She was calculating her next move. I didn't flinch. I didn't show fear. I knew what had to be done, and I wasn't going to let her take another step without facing the consequences of her actions. In that moment, everything came into focus. I had trained for situations like this, but no amount of training could have prepared me for what I was feeling inside. This wasn't just about my career. This wasn't about solving another case. This was personal. This was about my family, my daughter's husband, and the man standing in front of me, someone who thought she could take everything away with a single shot. And she had no idea that she wasn't in control anymore. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as Karen's finger tightened on the gun's trigger. Her gaze was wild now, her earlier composure slipping into panic. She was cornered. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back, but I stayed focused, standing my ground. I had to remain calm. Not just for me, but for Rachel. For Ryan. For the future we still had left to fight for. I glanced at the door, knowing it wouldn't be long before the cavalry arrived. But would it be too late? Karen was losing her grip on the situation, her eyes darting between the gun and me. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts, her once confident stance now faltering under the weight of her own actions. I wasn't sure what was going through her mind, but I saw one thing clearly: she was unraveling. Her voice came out shaky, but the malice was still there. "You think you can take me down? You think you're going to get away with this? I'm the one who's in charge here. People like you, like your family, you'll never get it. You'll never be in control." The words dripped with venom, but there was something different in her tone now. Fear. Desperation. "Karen," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. "You made a mistake, and now you're going to pay for it. No one gets to take a life and walk away. Not you. Not anyone." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. For a moment, she seemed almost human again, her cold demeanor cracking just enough to reveal the guilt and fear that she had buried beneath her facade. But it didn't last. It never did with her. "I didn't mean to," Karen began, but I cut her off, my tone turning darker. "No, don't try to play the victim now," I said sharply. "You made a choice. You didn't just shoot Ryan, you destroyed a family. And I'll make sure you answer for it." The air between us was thick with tension. I could see the shift in her posture, the way her fingers twitched on the trigger as if she were ready to pull it at any second. But she was stalling. She was stalling because she knew she had nothing left. I took another slow step toward her, trying not to show how much my body was screaming to act. Patience. I needed patience. "Listen to me, Karen," I said, my voice dropping to a low, almost dangerous level. "You think you've won. You think you've gotten away with everything. But you're wrong. You don't get to walk away from this. Not when my daughter's husband is lying on the ground bleeding. Not when you've caused this much destruction." She flinched at my words, her grip on the gun wavering for just a moment. I seized the opportunity. I knew I had to act. I moved quickly, my hand flashing out to knock the gun from her grasp. The sound of the gun clattering to the floor rang in my ears, and in the same motion, I grabbed her by the arm, pulling her back. She struggled for a second, but she was too weak, too shaken. She was finished. The moment I had taken the gun from her, the fear in her eyes had turned to fury, but it was no longer the controlled rage of someone used to getting her way. This was panic. She had no control anymore. The distant sound of sirens was growing louder. I knew help was coming, but I also knew that the moment I let go of her, Karen would try something desperate. She was a wild card, and I wasn't going to let her out of my sight. I tightened my grip on her arm, forcing her against the wall. "This ends here, Karen. You're done. You've taken too much from us, and you're going to pay for it. I'll make sure of it." Her mouth worked open and shut as if she were trying to find words, but none came. She had no more excuses. I could hear the police officers outside now, their boots pounding the pavement as they ran toward the house. The sound of their voices, shouting orders, announcing their presence, was the final confirmation I needed. Karen was done. I stepped back as the front door slammed open. The officers rushed in, guns drawn, but I waved them off with a single gesture. They froze, seeing the situation for themselves. "She's under arrest," I said, my voice firm, "for attempted murder and much more. Don't let her go." The officers approached, their eyes flicking between me and Karen. One of them stepped forward, cuffing her wrists tightly, the tension in the room palpable as they read her rights. Karen didn't fight it. She was broken. I watched her being led away, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had finally seen the consequences of her actions, and they were coming for her. I turned back to Rachel, who was now standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of relief and shock. She had seen everything. The shooting, the confrontation, the way I had taken control of the situation. "I'm so sorry, Rachel," I said softly, walking toward her. "I wish I could have protected you from this sooner." Rachel stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Strength. "We're okay now, Dad. It's over. Karen can't hurt us anymore." I nodded, pulling her into a tight hug. And for the first time since the shooting, I felt the weight in my chest ease just a little. We had survived. But the truth was, this was far from over. Karen's arrest was just the beginning. There were still pieces to pick up, still justice to be served. But for now, for this moment, my family was safe. And that was everything. The days that followed Karen's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions. Rachel and I spent hours on the phone with investigators, recounting every detail of what had happened. Each time I had to speak about that moment, the moment Karen pulled the trigger on Ryan, it felt like a fresh wound reopening. But we pushed through. It was necessary. Justice had to be served, not just for Ryan, but for everyone Karen had ever hurt with her twisted sense of control. The case against Karen quickly became the talk of the neighborhood, and soon the entire community was buzzing with gossip and disbelief. People couldn't fathom how the woman they thought was just a petty HOA president could be capable of something so horrific. But that's the thing about monsters, they don't always look the way you expect them to. Rachel and I spent more time together than we had in a long while, and that time was precious. In the midst of the chaos, I found solace in her strength. She had been through something I couldn't begin to imagine, yet she still stood tall, never once letting fear define her. She was my daughter, my pride, and as I watched her move forward, I realized that this ordeal had, in some strange way, brought us even closer. But there were moments in the stillness of the night when the weight of everything would hit me. The image of Ryan on the ground, bleeding out in front of Rachel, was still burned into my mind. I would close my eyes and see it, feel it, and I'd be consumed by a cold rage that bubbled up from deep inside me. Karen had taken something from me that I could never get back. I knew there was no going back to the way things were. The damage she caused was permanent. But there was also a strange sense of peace settling over me as I watched the wheels of justice begin to turn. Karen's trial was set, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. It wasn't just the shooting, it was her involvement in illegal activities that spanned years. She had been running a criminal enterprise under the guise of HOA rules, money laundering, extortion, threats, and much more. Her time of being untouchable was over. I went to visit Ryan in the hospital every day. He had been stable since the surgery, but there were still many hurdles to overcome. The bullet had gone deep, and the doctors said it was nothing short of a miracle he survived. Every time I saw him lying there in the hospital bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed him. I had failed to protect him in the one place where he should have felt safe. But Ryan wasn't just a victim. He was a fighter, and I saw that more clearly each time I walked into his room. He was fighting to recover, to heal, to be there for Rachel, and for his future. He was determined to prove that Karen's attempt to take his life wouldn't define him. One afternoon, after a particularly long visit, I sat with Rachel in the waiting area outside Ryan's room. The atmosphere was calm, but it felt heavy. This was the first time I'd allowed myself to think about the long-term impact of everything that had happened. "I'm scared, Dad," Rachel said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I don't know if I can ever go back to normal after this. I don't know if Ryan can either." I reached across the table and took her hand. The warmth of her skin against mine felt grounding. "We don't have to go back to normal, Rachel. We just have to keep moving forward. It won't be easy, but we'll get through this together. You and Ryan, you both have each other. And that's more than a lot of people have." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I wanted to take away her fear, her pain, but I knew I couldn't. What had happened to her was unthinkable. But she was strong. Stronger than I ever imagined. Over the next few weeks, Karen's trial unfolded, and the truth about everything she had done came to light. The FBI had uncovered a web of criminal activities that stretched far beyond just the HOA. She had been involved in money laundering, extortion, illegal construction schemes, and more. Every layer that was peeled back revealed another dark secret, another reason why she had been so intent on controlling everyone around her. I was at the courthouse the day Karen was sentenced. She was guilty on all counts, and the judge wasn't lenient. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for attempted murder, racketeering, and a list of other charges. The courtroom was packed with people who had been affected by her actions, people she had victimized without a second thought. But none of that could bring back what she had taken from us. I had never been a fan of revenge, but seeing her led away in handcuffs gave me a sense of closure. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. Rachel, Ryan, and I stood together as the sentence was handed down. It felt like a weight had been lifted off all our shoulders, even though the scars of what had happened would never truly fade. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Ryan's recovery continued, though it was slow. The road ahead was long, but he was determined, and so was Rachel. They leaned on each other, and that gave me hope for their future. As for me, I would continue my work with the FBI. I would never stop fighting for what was right. But I would never forget the lesson I learned during this battle. No matter how dark the world may seem, no one can take away the love and strength that family gives you. And no matter what happens, no one would ever threaten my family again. The days following Karen's sentencing felt almost surreal. The world had finally shifted back into a sense of normalcy, though it was a normal that would forever be marked by what had transpired. As much as I wanted to believe we could erase the pain, the memories of that day, of Karen's gunshot, of Rachel and Ryan's trauma, still lingered like scars that time couldn't heal. But we had survived. Ryan was still recovering physically, and Rachel was picking up the pieces of her shattered life, but I could see the light returning to her eyes. She wasn't the same person she was before, and neither was I. We were stronger now. Together we were stronger. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun set, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The chaos, the fear, the anger, it had all seemed like a never-ending storm. But now, as the last light of the day faded into the horizon, I could feel a calm settling over me. The storm was over. It wasn't just the trial or Karen's conviction that gave me peace. It was the way my family had pulled together. The way Rachel had leaned on Ryan, the way Ryan had fought to survive, the way I had fought to protect them both. In the end, that was what mattered. I looked over at Rachel, sitting beside me on the porch. She had been through hell and back, but she had emerged stronger, more resilient than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't have been more proud of her. "I'm glad you're okay, Dad," Rachel said, her voice soft, as if she were still processing everything that had happened. "I don't think I could have gotten through this without you. Without us." I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "We got through it together, Rachel. That's what family does. We stick together no matter what." Ryan joined us on the porch, his movements still slow but determined. His recovery was a daily struggle, but he was fighting with everything he had. When he sat down next to Rachel, I saw the way they looked at each other, the way love and gratitude filled their eyes. It was a moment of quiet strength, the kind of strength that Karen could never have imagined. She had tried to tear us apart, but all she had done was bring us closer together. "Dad," Ryan said quietly, his voice still a little rough from the trauma, "I don't think I can ever truly express how thankful I am. For everything. For you being there when it mattered most." I placed a hand on his shoulder, my grip firm, but my heart swelling with pride. Ryan was going to be okay. They were going to be okay. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice steady. "No one can take away what we have. No one. We're family, and nothing is stronger than that." The days turned into weeks, and slowly we began to heal. The neighborhood, once fraught with tension and whispers, eventually settled back into a strange sort of peace. Karen was gone, and her reign of terror had come to an end, but the lessons we learned from that nightmare stayed with us. Rachel and Ryan's bond grew even stronger, and I watched as they moved forward, planning their future with renewed determination. They had survived something no one should ever have to go through, but they had come out of it together, stronger than ever. As for me, I returned to work with the FBI, but I knew that everything had changed. I had changed. I would never be the same person who walked into that house, who faced Karen down in the doorway. The man who had confronted that shooter, who had fought to protect his family with everything he had, was different, stronger, more resolute. And so, as the sun set that evening with my family by my side, I knew that we were moving forward. The past would always be with us, but we had the power to shape our future. Together. Final CTA, 200 to 300 words. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed a story of resilience, love, and the unwavering bond of family. We've seen how far a father will go to protect his family, and how powerful love can be in the face of evil. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family and what you do to protect them, hit that subscribe button. Join us for more stories of bravery, justice, and the triumph of family over adversity. This is a place where strength and love come first, no matter what. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because when it comes to family, nothing can break us. Thanks for watching, and remember, family always comes first. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed the strength and determination of a father willing to do anything to protect his family. This story is a reminder of the lengths we'll go to when the ones we love are threatened, and how love can be a source of unstoppable power. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you act in the face of danger? Would you rise to the challenge when everything you hold dear is at stake? I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if you believe that family is worth fighting for, then hit that subscribe button for more stories that inspire and remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Share this video with anyone who needs to see the power of justice, love, and family. And remember, we're stronger together. Nothing can break the bond of family. Thanks for watching, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story.